On a perfectly ordinary sunny afternoon, a man who thought he had everything rolled down his tinted car window. Money, power, respect. He had built an empire from nothing, and now he sat in the back of a luxury SUV worth more than most people's homes. His gold watch caught the afternoon light as he scrolled through stock alerts on his phone, barely paying attention to the world outside. But then something made him look up. Something made him pause. And in that single moment, his entire world shattered into a million pieces. Because there, kneeling on the burning pavement just 15 feet away, was the one person he never expected to see again. His ex-wife. The woman who had vanished 8 years ago without a single word. The woman he had searched for, mourned, and eventually tried to forget. She was holding a cardboard sign that read, "Help me buy medicine for my sick child." And beside her, a frail little boy coughed so hard his small body shook. Their eyes met through the open window. She recognized him instantly. Her lips trembled, forming his name without sound. And he sat there frozen, his hand gripping the leather seat so hard his knuckles turned white. 8 years of questions, 8 years of anger, 8 years of wondering why she left him flooded back in a single heartbeat. But what he did not know yet, what he could not possibly have guessed in that moment, was that the dying child struggling to breathe on that hot sidewalk was his son. A son he never knew existed. A son who had spent his entire life fighting to survive, while his billionaire father lived in ignorant luxury just miles away. This is not just a story about money or power. This is a story about love that was stolen, about lies that nearly destroyed a family, and about a truth so devastating that it would bring a grown man to his knees. Stay with me until the very end. Because what happened next did not just shock him. It changed everything. Before we continue with this incredible story, I want to take a moment to connect with all of you watching right now. Drop a comment below and let us know where you are watching from today. Whether you are in New York, Texas, California, or somewhere across the world, we would love to hear from you. Your comments mean everything to this community. And if you are new here and this is your first time on this channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you do not want to miss the stories we have coming up. They are the kind of stories that stay with you long after the video ends. Now, let us get back to Daniel and Beth, because their journey is just beginning. To understand how Daniel and Beth ended up on opposite sides of that car window, separated by 8 years and a lifetime of pain, we need to go back to the beginning. Back before the billions. Back before the betrayal. Back to a time when Daniel Cole was just a hungry kid with a dream bigger than his empty pockets. 10 years before that sunny afternoon, Daniel was nobody. He lived in a cramped studio apartment on the rough side of the city, the kind of place where the radiator clanked all night and the neighbors' arguments bled through the thin walls. He worked 2 jobs during the day and taught himself to code at night, hunched over a secondhand laptop until his eyes burned and his back ached. His mother, Evelyn, had raised him alone after his father walked out when Daniel was 7 years old. She cleaned houses for wealthy families, scrubbing their toilets and washing their dishes while her son sat in waiting rooms doing homework. She sacrificed everything so Daniel could have a chance, and she never let him forget it. Every decision she made, every dollar she saved, every meal she skipped was for him. She was fierce, proud, and absolutely terrified that her son would end up poor like her. So when Daniel started talking about starting his own company instead of getting a safe corporate job, Evelyn was furious. She called his dreams foolish. She said he was chasing shadows. She begged him to be practical. But Daniel had inherited her stubbornness along with her work ethic, and he refused to give up. That was when he met Beth. She was a waitress at a small diner near his apartment, the kind of place where the coffee was bitter but cheap, and you could sit for hours without anyone bothering you. Daniel went there every night after his shift, nursing a single cup of coffee while he worked on his business plan. Beth noticed him after the first week. This tired young man in clothes that did not quite fit, staring at his laptop screen like it held the secrets of the universe. One night, she brought him a slice of pie he did not order. On the house, she said with a smile that lit up her entire face. He tried to refuse, but she insisted, and somehow, that small act of kindness cracked something open inside him. They started talking. First about little things like the weather and the terrible music playing on the diner's old radio. Then about bigger things like dreams and fears and the futures they were desperately trying to build. Beth was putting herself through community college, studying accounting because it was practical, even though she really wanted to be a teacher. She understood what it meant to fight for something with nothing but determination and hope. She understood Daniel in a way that nobody else ever had. Within 6 months, they were inseparable. Within a year, they were married. The wedding was simple, almost embarrassingly so. Beth wore a white dress she found at a thrift store, and Daniel rented a suit that was slightly too big in the shoulders. They had maybe 20 guests, mostly Beth's coworkers from the diner and a few of Daniel's friends from the neighborhood. Evelyn came, but she sat in the back with her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line. She did not smile during the ceremony. She did not cry happy tears. She watched her son pledge his life to this woman she barely knew, and all she could think about was everything that could go wrong. Beth noticed the coldness from her new mother-in-law, but she tried not to let it bother her. She told herself that Evelyn would warm up eventually, that once she saw how happy they were together, she would come around. Beth had no idea how wrong she was. After the wedding, Daniel threw himself into building his company with even more intensity. He was designing software that would revolutionize how small businesses manage their inventory. It was a good idea at the right time, and slowly, investors started paying attention. Beth supported him through every late night and every setback. When he doubted himself, she reminded him why he started. When he wanted to quit, she told him she believed in him. When he forgot to eat, she brought him sandwiches and sat beside him in silence while he worked. She was his partner in every sense of the word. But as the company grew, so did the distance between them. Daniel started traveling for meetings, sometimes gone for days at a time. He hired employees, moved into a real office, started wearing suits that actually fit. The money came slowly at first, then faster than either of them could have imagined. Within 3 years, Daniel's company was worth millions. Within 5 years, he was a billionaire. Magazines put him on their covers. News anchors called him the next great American success story. And through it all, Evelyn was right there beside him, glowing with pride, finally vindicated in all her sacrifices. She attended his events, sat in the front row at his speeches, and smiled for the cameras. She had been right all along, she told herself. Her son was destined for greatness. But as Evelyn's star rose alongside her son's, Beth seemed to dim. She did not fit into Daniel's new world of galas and corporate dinners. She did not know how to make small talk with billionaires' wives or which fork to use at fancy restaurants. She felt herself becoming invisible, fading into the background of her own marriage. And Evelyn noticed. More than noticed, Evelyn exploited it. The comments started small, so subtle that Beth almost missed them at first. Little observations at family dinners about how overwhelming Daniel's life must be for someone like her. Gentle suggestions that perhaps Beth might be happier if she spent more time on her own interests. Casual remarks about how Daniel needed a partner who understood his world, who could stand beside him as an equal. Daniel never seemed to hear these comments. He was always distracted, always checking his phone or thinking about the next deal. And every time Beth tried to bring it up, she felt petty and paranoid. Evelyn was his mother, after all. She was just looking out for her son, right? The truth was far darker. Evelyn had never accepted Beth as good enough for Daniel. In her mind, Beth was a distraction, a liability, a remnant of her son's humble past that needed to be erased. And as the years went on, Evelyn began to plan. She gathered information, made connections, and waited for the perfect opportunity to remove Beth from the picture permanently. That opportunity came on a bright spring morning 8 years ago. Daniel was packing for an important business trip, his mind already on the meetings and negotiations waiting for him across the country. Beth watched him from the doorway of their bedroom, her heart pounding with a secret she had been keeping for 2 weeks. She was pregnant. She had taken the test 3 times just to be sure, and each time those 2 little lines appeared, she felt a rush of joy and terror so intense it made her dizzy. This was supposed to be the happiest news of their lives. But as she watched Daniel check his phone for the 10th time that morning, she felt a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Their marriage had been strained lately. The distance between them seemed to grow wider every day. Part of her wondered if a baby would bring them closer together. Another part wondered if Daniel even wanted to be a father anymore. She gathered her courage and walked toward him, the positive pregnancy test hidden in her pocket. "Daniel," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." He looked up briefly, already distracted. What is it, honey? I need to leave in 20 minutes. Before she could answer, his phone rang. She watched his face change as he listened, watched him shift immediately into business mode. He held up one finger to her, mouthing the words, "1 second," as he paced toward the window. The call lasted 15 minutes. By the time he hung up, he was already grabbing his suitcase and heading for the door. Sorry, Beth, there is an investor emergency. They moved my flight up. We will talk when I get back, okay? I promise. He kissed her quickly, barely a brush of lips against her forehead, and then he was gone. The door closed behind him with a click that echoed through the empty house. Beth stood there for a long moment, her hand pressed against her still flat stomach, tears burning in her eyes. She told herself it was fine. He would be back in a few days. She would tell him then. They would figure everything out together. But fate had other plans. And those plans were already walking up the driveway. The doorbell rang 2 hours later. Beth wiped her eyes and checked her reflection in the hallway mirror before answering. She expected a delivery driver or maybe a neighbor. Instead, she found Evelyn standing on her porch, dressed impeccably as always in a tailored suit and pearls, her silver hair perfectly styled. Her smile was warm, but something about her eyes made Beth's skin prickle with unease. "Evelyn," Beth said, surprised. "Daniel just left for his trip." "I know, dear," Evelyn replied smoothly. "That is why I am here. I thought we might have a little chat. Just the two of us." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she made her way toward the kitchen. Beth followed, her heart beginning to race with a fear she could not quite explain. They sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the windows, making everything look deceptively peaceful. Evelyn placed her designer handbag on the table and folded her hands in front of her. For a long moment, she just looked at Beth, studying her like a scientist examining a specimen. "Beth," Evelyn began, her voice almost kind. "I have always tried to be patient with you. I know you mean well. I know you love my son. But we need to have an honest conversation about your future." "My future?" Beth asked, confusion clouding her features. Evelyn sighed, as if this conversation was causing her great pain. "My son is destined for extraordinary things. He is building something that will change the world. But every great man needs the right partner beside him. Someone who understands his world. Someone who can stand beside him as an equal. And I am afraid, dear, that partner is not you." The words hit Beth like a physical blow. She sat there stunned, unable to process what she was hearing. "Are you saying I am not good enough for Daniel?" Evelyn's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "I am saying you are holding him back. He cannot afford distractions. He cannot afford your kind of life." Before Beth could respond, Evelyn reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She slid it across the table, and Beth saw that it contained photographs. Daniel at corporate events surrounded by powerful people. Newspaper clippings praising his genius. Contract documents worth hundreds of millions of dollars. "This is my son's destiny," Evelyn said quietly, "and you are not part of it." Beth's hands trembled as she pushed the envelope away. "You cannot make me leave him." Evelyn smiled then, a cold smile that made Beth's blood run cold. "Actually, I can. And I will." She reached back into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. The next words she spoke were delivered with the precision of a surgeon making a fatal incision. "I know you are pregnant," Evelyn said. Beth's hand flew instinctively to her stomach. "How did you know?" "I have my ways," Evelyn replied. "Now listen to me very carefully. You will leave my son today. Right now. No forwarding address. No goodbye. No explanation. You will vanish completely from his life." Beth shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I will not. I love him." Evelyn leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "If you stay, I will take that child from you. You do not understand the world I move in, Beth. The lawyers I can afford. The judges who owe me favors. You are a nobody from nowhere with no money and no connections. In a custody battle against me, you will lose. You will lose everything." Beth felt the room spinning around her. This could not be happening. This had to be a nightmare. "Please," she whispered. "Do not do this." Evelyn's expression did not waver. "I am giving you a choice. Leave now, take this money, and give your child a chance at a normal life away from all of this. Or stay, and I promise you, I will make sure you never see that baby again. Either way, my son will be free of you. It is just a matter of how much you are willing to sacrifice." The silence that followed was deafening. Beth could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could feel the weight of the life growing inside her. She thought about fighting. She thought about calling Daniel, about telling him everything, about trusting that their love was strong enough to overcome his mother's hatred. But then she thought about what Evelyn had said, about lawyers and judges and custody battles, about being a nobody from nowhere trying to fight a billionaire family with unlimited resources. And she thought about her baby, her innocent, unborn baby who had not asked for any of this. Fear won. It always does when a mother's child is threatened. By the time Daniel's plane landed that evening, Beth was gone. She had packed a single bag of clothes, taken the money Evelyn offered because she knew she would need it to survive, and walked out of the house she had called home for 5 years. She left her wedding ring on the kitchen table. She left no note. And she disappeared into a world that was suddenly cold and unfamiliar and terrifying beyond measure. Daniel came home to an empty house and a mystery that would haunt him for 8 years. He searched for her at first, hired private investigators, called everyone she knew. But Beth had covered her tracks well, moving from city to city, using cash instead of credit cards, avoiding anyone who might connect her to her old life. Eventually, Daniel stopped looking. He told himself she had simply chosen to leave him, that their marriage had been failing anyway, that she wanted something different from life. He buried his grief beneath work and success and the cold comfort of his mother's approval. He had no idea what had really driven her away. He had no idea about the son who was growing up without him, fighting battles no child should ever have to face. And now, 8 years later, fate had brought them back together in the most unexpected way possible. Daniel stood on that hot sidewalk, staring at the woman who had once been his whole world. She looked nothing like the Beth he remembered. Her hair was streaked with gray, though she was not yet 40. Her face was lined with exhaustion and worry. Her clothes were worn and faded, but her eyes were the same. Those warm brown eyes that had once looked at him with so much love and hope. "Beth," he said, his voice cracking. "Is it really you?" She flinched at the sound of her name, as if she had forgotten what it sounded like on his lips. "Daniel, I can explain." Before she could continue, the little boy beside her coughed violently, his small body convulsing with the effort. Beth immediately turned her attention to him, her hands gentle but frantic as she supported his head and rubbed his back. "It is okay, baby," she murmured. "Mama is here. Just breathe." Daniel watched, something clicking into place in his mind. The boy looked about 7 or 8 years old. He had dark hair like Daniel's, the same stubborn set to his jaw, the same shape of his eyes. "What is wrong with him?" Daniel demanded, kneeling down beside them, suddenly aware of how fragile the child looked. His skin was pale, almost gray. His breathing was labored. He seemed to weigh almost nothing. Beth looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw shame in her eyes, along with fear and desperation and something that looked terrifyingly like hopelessness. "He needs medicine," she said. "He has been sick for months, but I cannot afford the treatment. The hospital turned us away because we do not have insurance. I have been out here for 3 days, begging anyone who will listen, but nobody stops. Nobody cares." Daniel felt his heart crack open. "Tell me his name," he said quietly. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, he saw the truth before she even spoke. "His name is David," she whispered. "He is 8 years old, and he is your son." The world stopped. The noise of the city faded away until all Daniel could hear was the ragged breathing of the child at his feet. His son. He had a son who had been alive for 8 years without him, a son who was now dying on a street corner while strangers walked past without a second glance. "Why?" Daniel demanded, his voice raw with emotion. "Why did you not tell me? Why did you leave? Do you have any idea what I have been through?" Beth's tears fell freely now, cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "I could not," she said. "Your mother, she came to me. She knew I was pregnant. She threatened to take him from me if I stayed. She said she would use her money and her lawyers and her connections to make sure I never saw him again. I was scared, Daniel. I was so scared. And I thought if I just disappeared, he would be safe. I thought I could give him a better life away from all of that." Daniel's mind reeled. His mother? His own mother had done this? The woman who had sacrificed everything for him, who had worked her fingers to the bone so he could have opportunities, who had stood beside him at every milestone of his success. She had driven away his wife and hidden his son from him for 8 years? It was too much to process, too much to believe. But right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was the little boy who was struggling to breathe. What mattered was getting him help before it was too late. "We need to get him to a hospital," Daniel said, his voice suddenly sharp with determination. He scooped David up in his arms, shocked at how light the boy was, how thin and fragile. David's head lolled against his shoulder, but his eyes fluttered open. He looked up at Daniel with confusion and something that might have been curiosity. "Who are you?" David asked weakly. Daniel's throat tightened. "I am someone who is going to help you," he said. "Can you hold on for me? Just a little bit longer?" David nodded, his small fingers clutching the fabric of Daniel's expensive suit. Daniel carried him to the SUV, Beth following close behind, her steps unsteady with exhaustion and relief. Within minutes, they were racing through city streets toward the nearest hospital, the driver weaving through traffic at Daniel's urgent command. Beth sat in the back beside David, holding his hand and whispering reassurances while Daniel made calls. By the time they arrived at the emergency room, the staff was already waiting. Daniel had pulled strings, called in favors, and promised whatever payment was necessary. The next few hours were a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells and the constant beeping of medical equipment. Doctors examined David, ran tests, and conferred in hushed voices. Daniel paced the waiting room while Beth sat motionless, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Finally, a doctor emerged with a clipboard and a serious expression. The diagnosis was acute anemia, she explained. Severe and prolonged. It was clear David had been suffering for a long time without proper treatment. His body was weakened, his organs strained from the constant effort of functioning without enough healthy blood cells. But the condition was treatable. With proper medication, blood transfusions, and ongoing care, David would recover. The cost would be substantial, but that was the least of Daniel's concerns. He authorized everything immediately, barely glancing at the forms before signing them. Later that night, after David had been stabilized and was sleeping peacefully in a private room, Daniel and Beth finally had a chance to talk. They sat in the hospital corridor, surrounded by the quiet sounds of nighttime in a medical facility. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across their faces. Daniel stared at the wall for a long moment before speaking. 8 years, he said quietly. 8 years I thought you just walked away. 8 years I thought our marriage meant nothing to you. I blamed myself at first. Then I blamed you. Eventually, I just tried to forget. Beth's voice was barely audible. I am so sorry. You cannot possibly know how sorry I am. But I was terrified, Daniel. Your mother made it very clear that I had no power, no resources, nothing to fight her with. She said if I stayed, she would destroy me. And more importantly, she would take our child. I could not let that happen. Daniel turned to look at her, really look at her for the first time since that afternoon. He saw the lines of worry etched into her face, the gray in her hair that should not have been there for another decade, the rough calluses on her hands from years of hard labor. What have you been doing all this time? He asked. Beth let out a small, humorless laugh. Surviving. I used the money your mother gave me to get settled in a new city. Found a tiny apartment, got a job cleaning offices at night so I could take care of David during the day. When he started school, I added more jobs. Washing dishes, folding laundry at a hotel. Whatever I could find that would let me be there when he needed me. It was never enough. Medical bills piled up. Rent kept going up. Food got more expensive. But I managed. We managed. Until David got sick and the bills became more than I could handle. Daniel thought about his own life over those same 8 years. The penthouse apartment. The vacation homes. The expensive cars and custom suits and gourmet meals. He had spent more on a single business dinner than Beth probably earned in a month. And all that time, his son had been out there struggling, wondering why his father was not in his life, not knowing that his father was living in luxury just miles away. How could she do this? Daniel asked, his voice breaking. How could my own mother do something so cruel? Beth shook her head. I have asked myself that question 1,000 times. I think she convinced herself she was protecting you, that I was a threat to your success somehow, that you would be better off without me holding you back. I do not know if she ever thought about what it would do to David, or to me, or even to you, in the end. Daniel stood abruptly, his hands clenching into fists. I need to confront her, he said. I need to hear it from her own mouth. Beth reached out and touched his arm. Daniel, wait. David needs you here. Whatever you need to say to your mother can wait until morning. For a moment, Daniel wanted to argue. The rage burning inside him demanded immediate confrontation, immediate answers. But then he thought about the little boy sleeping in the room behind him. The son he had just found after 8 years of not knowing he existed. Beth was right. David had to come first. The confrontation came the next day. Daniel left Beth at the hospital with David, who was awake and already looking better after a night of proper medical care, and drove to his mother's house. Evelyn lived in a sprawling mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, a house that Daniel had bought for her 5 years ago as a thank you for all her sacrifices. Now, the sight of it made him feel sick. He found her in the sunroom, surrounded by expensive artwork and fresh flowers, sipping tea from a china cup that probably cost more than Beth's monthly rent. She looked up when he entered, her face lighting up with a smile that froze when she saw his expression. Daniel, she said carefully. What a surprise. I did not expect you today. He did not sit down. He stood in front of her, his body rigid with barely contained fury. I found Beth, he said. Evelyn's face went pale. She set down her teacup with a hand that trembled slightly. Daniel, I do not know what she told you, but she told me everything, Daniel interrupted. About how you went to her 8 years ago. About how you threatened to take her child if she did not leave. About how you used your money and your power to drive away the woman I loved. Evelyn's composure cracked, just for a moment. Then she straightened her spine and lifted her chin defiantly. I did what I had to do. You were throwing away your future for that woman. She was not right for you. She would have held you back. I did what any mother would do to protect her son. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. Protect me? You destroyed my marriage. You stole 8 years from me. Years I could have spent with my wife. Years I could have spent watching my son grow up. Evelyn's face went white. Your son? Yes, mother. Beth was pregnant when you drove her away. I have a son. His name is David. He is 8 years old. And do you know where I found him yesterday? On a street corner, so sick he could barely stand, while his mother begged strangers for money to buy him medicine. That is what your protection accomplished. Evelyn seemed to shrink before his eyes. All the steel and pride drained out of her, leaving behind an old woman who suddenly looked every one of her 72 years. I did not know, she whispered. About the child. I thought she would just move on, find someone else, have a normal life. I did not think. You did not think at all, Daniel said coldly. You were so focused on what you wanted from me that you never stopped to ask what I wanted. And now, because of your choices, a little boy almost died. A little boy who looks just like me when I was his age. My son. Tears began to stream down Evelyn's face, something Daniel had never seen before. Even when his father left, even during the hardest years of poverty and struggle, his mother had never cried. I am sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was so afraid of losing you, of watching you throw away everything I sacrificed for. Fear made me cruel. Fear made me blind. I am so sorry. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. He looked at this woman who had shaped his entire life, who had worked her fingers to the bone to give him opportunities, who had pushed him relentlessly toward success. He saw now that her love had always been tangled up with control, her protection always edged with manipulation. She was not evil. She was damaged. She was afraid. But her fear had caused immeasurable harm. I cannot forgive you, Daniel said finally. Not today. Maybe not ever. What you did was unforgivable. But I am not here to punish you, mother. I am here because I need you to understand something. From now on, I am going to do everything in my power to make things right with Beth and David. They are my family, my real family. And if you ever try to interfere again, if you ever try to hurt them in any way, I will cut you out of my life completely. I will not hesitate. Do you understand? Evelyn nodded, her tears still falling. I understand. I understand. Daniel turned to leave, but her voice stopped him at the door. Can I see him? She asked softly. My grandson. Can I at least see him, just once? Daniel paused. That is not my decision to make. It is Beth's. And David's. If they ever want to meet you, I will not stop them. But you do not get to demand anything from them. You have not earned that right. He left her there, alone in her beautiful house full of expensive things that suddenly felt very empty. And as he drove back to the hospital, he felt something shifting inside him. The anger was still there, hot and raw and demanding. But there was something else too. A fragile thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, it was not too late to rebuild what had been broken. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes. David's health improved dramatically with proper treatment. Color returned to his cheeks. His cough faded. He started to look like a normal 8-year-old boy instead of a ghost. Beth stayed by his side every moment, barely sleeping, as if she was afraid he might disappear if she looked away. Daniel visited every day, sometimes for hours at a time. At first, David was shy around him, uncertain how to act around this stranger who was supposedly his father. But gradually, tentatively, they began to connect. Daniel brought him comic books and video games. He sat with him during treatments, distracting him with stories about his childhood. He answered David's endless questions with patience he did not know he had. And slowly, a bond began to form between them. Beth and Daniel talked too, late at night when David was sleeping, working through the mountain of hurt and misunderstanding that had built up over 8 years. It was not easy. There were arguments and tears and moments when it seemed like the damage was too great to repair. But they kept trying. They kept talking. They kept choosing to move forward instead of backward. One evening, about 3 weeks after that fateful day on the sidewalk, Daniel was sitting beside David's hospital bed, helping him with a puzzle. David had been cleared for discharge the next morning, and there was a lightness in the room that had not been there before. "Dad," David said, the word still new and strange on his tongue. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel's heart swelled at that single word. Dad. He had dreamed about hearing it for 8 years without even knowing what he was missing. "Of course, buddy. You can ask me anything." David frowned, concentrating on fitting a puzzle piece into place. "Why did you not come find us? Mom said you did not know about me. But you are really smart and really rich. Could you not have looked harder?" Daniel set down the puzzle piece he was holding. For a moment, he did not know how to answer. How do you explain adult failures to a child? How do you tell your son that you gave up searching because it hurt too much, that you buried yourself in work instead of confronting the mystery of his mother's disappearance? "You are right," Daniel said finally. "I should have looked harder. I should have never stopped looking. I made a mistake, David. A big one. And I am so sorry. I cannot change the past, but I promise you, from now on, I will never stop fighting for you. I will never let you go again." David considered this with the solemn gravity only a child can muster. "Okay," he said. "I believe you. But you have to make it up to Mom too. She was really sad sometimes. She tried to hide it, but I could tell." Daniel nodded, his throat tight. "I know. I am going to try my best to make it up to both of you. For the rest of my life." David smiled then, a real smile that lit up his entire face. "Good. Because I think I like having a dad." The morning of David's discharge from the hospital, Daniel arrived with a surprise. He had arranged for them to move into one of his properties, a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and a big backyard. It was nothing like the mansion where he usually lived, but that was intentional. He wanted them to feel comfortable, not overwhelmed. Beth hesitated at first. She was proud, independent, reluctant to accept what felt like charity. But Daniel convinced her that this was not about money. It was about giving David stability, giving them all a chance to heal and grow together. "Besides," he said with a wry smile, "I own the house. Consider it back rent for the 8 years I missed." Beth laughed despite herself. It was the first time he had heard her laugh in 8 years, and the sound made his heart ache with happiness and regret in equal measure. "What about your mother?" Beth asked quietly as they drove toward their new home. "Have you spoken to her since that day?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Briefly. She is still my mother. I cannot erase that. But I have made it clear that her relationship with us, with David, depends entirely on her behavior going forward. She does not get any more chances to hurt the people I love." Beth nodded slowly. I think I might want to meet with her. Eventually. Not to forgive her necessarily, but to understand. To close that chapter properly." Daniel reached over and took her hand. "That is your choice to make. Whatever you decide, I will support you." 3 months after that first encounter on the street, life had settled into something approaching normalcy. David started at a new school where he quickly made friends, his natural curiosity and warmth drawing other kids to him like a magnet. Beth was taking classes again, pursuing the teaching degree she had abandoned all those years ago. and Daniel had restructured his work schedule to spend more time at home, delegating responsibilities he once insisted on handling himself. It was not perfect. Nothing ever is. There were still difficult conversations, still moments when old wounds bled fresh. Beth had nightmares sometimes, dreams where Evelyn came back to take David away. Daniel struggled with guilt, the knowledge that his success had been built partly on ignorance of his family's suffering. And David, despite his resilience, was still processing the enormous changes in his life. But they were together. They were fighting for each other. And somehow, impossibly, they were building something beautiful from the wreckage of the past. One afternoon, about 4 months after everything changed, there was a knock at the door. Daniel answered it and found his mother standing on the porch. She looked older than he remembered, frailier. She was carrying a bag of gifts, and her eyes were red as if she had been crying. "May I come in?" she asked. "It is not up to me," Daniel said carefully. "Wait here." He went to find Beth, who was in the kitchen helping David with homework. They had a quiet conversation while Evelyn waited on the porch. Then Beth took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and went to the door. "Evelyn," she said, her voice steady but not cold. "It has been a long time." "Too long," Evelyn replied. "I have no right to be here. I know that. But I needed you to know how sorry I am. Sorry for what I did. Sorry for the years I stole from all of you. I was wrong, Beth. I was cruel and selfish, and I let my fear destroy something precious. There is nothing I can do to fix that. But if you would let me, I would like to try to be part of this family. The right way this time." Beth studied her for a long moment. "What made you change your mind?" Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "I saw a picture Daniel posted online of David at his new school. He looks so much like Daniel did at that age. And I realized I almost destroyed my own grandchild's life before it even started. I do not deserve your forgiveness. I know that, but I am begging for a chance to be better, to do better." Beth turned and looked at David, who had come to stand beside her. He was watching his grandmother with open curiosity. "You are my dad's mom?" he asked. Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I am." David considered this. "Mom says you did something really bad." Evelyn flinched, but did not look away. "Yes, I did. I hurt your mother very much. And I hurt you too, even though I never meant to. I am so sorry." David was quiet for a moment. Then, with the simple wisdom that children sometimes possess, he said, "My mom says holding on to anger is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to get sick." He paused, then added, "That does not make sense to me, because why would anyone drink poison? But I think she means you have to let go of bad feelings, or they hurt you. So, I guess I can try not to be angry at you. If you promise to be nice to my mom from now on." Evelyn let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I promise. I promise on everything I have." Beth looked at Daniel, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. It was her decision to make. Finally, she stepped aside. "You can come in," she said. "But understand this, Evelyn. I am doing this for David. He deserves to know his family, all of his family. But if you ever hurt him, if you ever try to come between us again, I will not give you another chance. There will not be a third act." Evelyn nodded gratefully, wiping her eyes. "I understand. Thank you. Thank you." It was not a fairy tale reconciliation. There were awkward dinners and stilted conversations and moments when the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But gradually, painfully, Evelyn began to earn back the trust she had destroyed. She showed up when she said she would. She bit her tongue when she wanted to criticize. She learned to ask instead of demand, to suggest instead of insist. She was not the same woman who had threatened Beth 8 years ago. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was the shock of nearly losing everything that mattered. Maybe people really can change when they finally face the consequences of their choices. 1 year after Daniel saw Beth on that street corner, they renewed their vows in a small ceremony in their backyard. David stood beside them, grinning from ear to ear, holding the rings. Evelyn sat in the front row, crying openly, but smiling too. And Beth wore a simple white dress that looked nothing like the one from her first wedding, but somehow felt even more meaningful. Daniel could not stop looking at her. She was not the same girl he had married all those years ago. She was stronger, wiser, marked by years of struggle that should never have been hers to bear alone. But she was here. They both were. And that was all that mattered. After the ceremony, As the sun set and their small gathering of friends and family celebrated, Daniel pulled Beth aside. "I have been thinking," he said, "about what David said that day. About poison and anger." Beth smiled. "Our son is remarkably insightful for an 8-year-old. Daniel nodded. "I think he is right. I think we have spent too much time looking backward at all the years we lost and all the pain we suffered. And I want to stop. I want to focus on what is ahead of us instead." "What are you saying?" Beth asked. "I am saying I want to start fresh. Really fresh. I want to move somewhere new, somewhere without all these memories. I want to build a new life with you and David. A life we choose together." Beth's eyes filled with tears. "Are you serious?" "I have never been more serious about anything," Daniel said. "I have all the money in the world, Beth. But until 8 months ago, I was missing the only thing that really matters. My family. I am not going to waste another day. You deserve better than what I gave you before. And so does David." Beth threw her arms around him, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. "Yes," she whispered against his neck. "Yes. Let us start over. Let us choose our life together." 6 months later, they moved to a small town by the ocean. Daniel sold most of his businesses, keeping only enough to ensure financial security. He did not need to conquer the world anymore. He had already found what he was looking for. Now, before I end this story, I want to ask you something. Put yourself in Beth's position for a moment. Imagine being so afraid, so powerless, that you felt you had no choice but to abandon the love of your life to protect your child. Would you have made the same decision? Or would you have stayed and fought, hoping that love would be enough to overcome the obstacles in your way? And if you were Daniel, could you forgive? Could you find it in your heart to rebuild a relationship with the mother who destroyed your family, even knowing she did it out of misguided love? These are not easy questions. There are no right answers. But I think they are worth asking, because stories like this remind us that life is messy and complicated and full of impossible choices. Sometimes the villains are not monsters. They are just scared people doing their best with limited understanding. Sometimes the victims are not helpless. They are warriors fighting battles no one else can see. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, we get a second chance. A chance to correct our mistakes. A chance to rebuild what was broken. A chance to choose love over fear, forgiveness over bitterness, connection over isolation. Daniel found Beth on that street corner by pure accident. Or maybe it was fate. Maybe the universe was giving them one final opportunity to write a different ending to their story. Either way, they took it. They chose each other. They chose their son. They chose to believe that it was not too late. And I hope, wherever you are right now, whatever struggles you are facing, you believe that too. It is never too late to change your path. It is never too late to reconnect with someone you have lost. It is never too late to say you are sorry, to ask for forgiveness, to try again. Life gives us chances every day. The question is whether we have the courage to take them. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about your own relationships and the choices you have made, I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Beth's situation? What would you have done in Daniel's? And have you ever been given a second chance that changed your life? Your stories matter. Your experiences matter. And this community is built on the connections we make with each other. So subscribe if you have not already, because there are more stories like this coming. Stories about love and loss and redemption. Stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. Stories that will stay with you long after the video ends. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, no matter how broken things seem, there is always hope for something better. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it.